Good morning. We are talking today about the new EU VAT rules for people selling to consumers across Europe and how it affects your business. Our primary focus today is on how it would work if you switch back to manual. Welcome everybody on the call. I can see we've got a number of people live in the room already, and I also have a co-presenter, Christopher, who's obviously got a bit of a cold. So Christopher, would you say good morning, and then when we're not live in session with you, would you mute yourself?
Good morning, and yes, I will mute myself so you don't have the benefit of the loud sneezes or anything like that. So, but I will be keeping an eye on the chat and trying to help Annabelle as we go through the program.
For those of you who are not used to having 9-dimensional VAT thrown at you, what I'm going to do is do a short presentation using slides where I'll give you a brief introduction to what the issues are and where we've got to on thinking on this, and I'm going to ask you to raise your questions in chat. Christopher's going to collate the questions and I'm going to do everything I can to answer them, but some of them no one knows the answer to, and that is one of the most perplexing things about this legislation, if you ask me, that no one knows it. So without further ado, I'm going to start explaining the madness of EU tax legislation in the closest to plain English I can get. So I'm going to start my slideshow. Christopher, please tell me there's a slight delay if you can't see it.
We can now see the slides.
Good. The weak point of any webinar, it turns out, is multitasking. So we're talking really about switching to manual and why you might want to and what effect this might have. And if this sounds like insanity to you at the moment, if you've set up a digital download automated business, it probably is, but there's a reason why we're having this conversation, and it's about the new VAT rules for digital products. Now, digital products are really anything you sell through the web that's delivered electronically, compared to a service where you either go and do it or you do it live in the room, as we are hopefully doing now, or compared to a physical product where you have to post it, send a courier with it, put it on a boat or a plane. And for a long time, the digital economy has been a bit out of sync with the real world. But as of the 1st of January 2015, and yes, I do know today is past the 1st, the EU have actually changed the situation for anybody selling to consumers in Europe. So even if you are based at the other end of the planet, these rules apply to you. They are for people selling what we call B2C, business to consumer. Now, a lot of people are a bit confused about what that is. So let me give you an example. If you sell stationery to me to use in my business, that is a B2B, a business-to-business transaction. The fact I'm not selling it on doesn't mean I'm not using it for my business. But if you sell stationery to me to send out as my personal Christmas cards or birthday cards, I am acting as a consumer, and that is a B2C transaction. So if you sell to people who are consuming your digital product or using it as an individual rather than as part of your business, these rules apply to you. The existing B2B rules continue to apply. Now, I don't know about you, I don't do a lot of B2B in Europe. UK employment law and employee relations is not really big in the rest of Europe. And when I do it, most of my clients already have people here and businesses here. So I didn't know about the B2B VAT rules, which mean that you have to get a VAT number or some other proof of trading in order to treat a European business customer as a business. I had wondered when I bought online why people wanted my VAT number, but I had absolutely no idea what was going on. So you have two choices. You either collect the business data and treat them as business, which means you charge with no VAT on your product, or if they don't give it to you, even though they are a business, you have to treat them as individual consumers. There is some discussion about whether other proof of trading will work, for example, a website that is obviously a business website, but certainly if you get a VAT number, you're on the high road, and if you don't, you don't. How many of us have been actively doing this today? Many of us have had very few European sales, and people outside the EU have certainly not bothered with it. The difference now is if you are selling B2C digital products, and that would include businesses who've not given you the correct information to treat them as businesses, you now need evidence of their location. It seems a bit eccentric to want to know where your customers are in a virtual world, but according to the new regulations, you need to charge their local VAT rate. And it's local to where they are when they're buying, not local to where they always are. So let me give you an example. Last December, I was in Tenerife doing some work. And while I was there, I bought a number of digital products. I was in Tenerife, and if these new rules had been in play, the things I bought for my business would still be covered under the B2B regulations. So if I put in my VAT number or other evidence that I'm trading, I would have been charged X VAT. But I also bought things for myself, and those things should have been charged at the Tenerife rate, because despite the fact that I live in England and I have an English credit card, I was in Tenerife when the sale went through. I'd like to give you a moment to think about that, because it's so crazy that a lot of business people say to me, it can't be true because it doesn't make sense. Well, we've been working with things like the transfer of undertakings, protection of employment regulations, working time regulations, and I think I can say after more than 30 years, the fact that a regulation doesn't make sense does not prove that it doesn't exist. How do you handle this madness? Well, first of all, the evidence of location is a problem. When I was shopping in Tenerife, if I'd used a local internet browser, for example, if I'd gone over to Google and accepted I was in Spain, you would have known if you electronically collect IP addresses, and we'll talk about that later, that I was in Tenerife. But if I logged on through my business account and used the server that is allocated to my Microsoft account, it would have showed me as being in Dublin. And if I bought something from you now, and I am sitting in London as we have this conversation, using that server, it would identify me as being in Dublin because that is where the server is located. So when it comes to charging your customer the appropriate VAT rate, the EU blithely imagines that you can work out where they are. There are some wonderful rules as well, by the way, that you can use the SIM card on the phone and take that as registration. But if people are in transit, if I got on a train at Ebbsfleet on the way to Paris, I would be viewed as making the transaction in England because that's where I left from. How I might know where you had recently left when you downloaded from my website at 3 in the morning when I'm fast asleep, I do not know. But this is Europe's idea of what we are going to be able to do. Do not panic. There are some exemptions to this. The first one is if you are selling your digital downloads through a marketplace. So if you put them up on Amazon or Kindle or some other third-party site that sells them for you, collects the money for you and gives you the net amount, in other words, you're selling to them wholesale and they are selling retail, the chances are that they are responsible for collecting the digital VAT, which means if that's all you're doing, if that's your only route to market for your digital products, you do not need to worry about registering. It's not as simple as it might be, because some of the biggest marketplaces, for example, Etsy, are denying that they are a marketplace, even though the UK tax authority, HMRC, are asserting that they are. These regulations have been brought into force with very little consultation, and confusion reigns in many areas. If you are selling a high ticket product, you may also be selling it via your website. Marketplaces generally charge between 30 and 40% markup on your product. And if you are not looking for them to create the marketing footfall for you to sell, you will probably be selling stuff on your own website. Our websites are in turmoil at the moment, being rewritten as we speak, because they do not even attempt to identify where you might be when you sell. And obviously that needs upgrading, and it does for many people. The other problem you're going to have is that if you're selling through your own website, you are not only going to have to register for the European VAT scheme, and we'll come on to that in a minute, but you're going to need to keep proof of where your customers were located and how you figured out what VAT rate to charge them for up to 10 years. And you need to keep that proof in a server that is based in Europe. Now, many of us have absolutely no idea where our servers are. I know, because as one of many things I do, I keep an eye on our company's data protection compliance, and I know, as many people do not, that I cannot keep my customer data on a server outside the EU unless I go through some very specific processes. But most people are completely unaware of that. So I'm one of the lucky ones that I was already primarily keeping my data inside the EU, but most of us are going to have to ask our cloud storage facilities, where are the servers? This is a bit counterintuitive when we're all going global in a global world, and part of the problem with this legislation is that it is assuming that physical boundaries exist in the digital world in a way that we don't. So how does this affect you if you are providing services and support and also selling digital downloads, as many of us are? The existing VAT rules apply if you are producing downloads to support your services. So, for example, if I was selling this webinar, which I'm not, and at the end of the webinar you got a download, the download would not be regarded as the digital product because it's there to support a service delivered by someone in person. So for many of us with training-based, coaching-based, advising-based businesses, one of the things to consider is whether we are going to bundle downloads into webinars, into processes that involve a human. Another way people, at least according to HMRC, can avoid this is to send individual emails with attachments. Those attachments can be pre-prepared. If you're thinking, but I just set up all my autoresponders to do that, you're quite right. This is a step backwards, and depending on your hourly rate costs, this may be an inappropriate option for all but the tiniest seller. And with a very reasonable download price, and we'll come on to that in a minute, this may not turn out to be a suitable long-term solution. But because we're in the initial stages of this, it may be something to look at as a transitional option while you sort yourself out. HMRC will accept these hand emailing of standard PDFs and JPEGs and MP3s as including sufficient element to get you out of the VAT rules for Europe. I should point out, though, that it's not at all clear whether other European VAT authorities will. For myself, I have taken the view that as a UK-based business, I will comply with the HMRC guidelines on the basis that if I'm following their written instructions and I've got it wrong, I'm going to kick up merry hell if somebody finds me. I know we have people on the call today who are not based in the UK, but I think we all need the same strategy to write to our local VAT enforcers to set out what we propose to do and ask them to confirm in writing whether they view that as within or outside the digital VAT European rules. If you get told something different, please join us on the Digital VAT Campaign Group. That's the Digital VAT Campaign Group on Facebook, and let us know what you're getting, because we are working very hard to collate the different responses and feed this back and bring some order out of chaos. If you are in Italy or out of luck, your government hasn't yet passed the enabling legislation, so no one can tell you what it means. You have to look at the cost of compliance here. If you make £1 worth of sales in the EU, even if you are below the UK VAT threshold, you need to register with the appropriate local authority for the European VAT scheme. And you need to account for that revenue at the appropriate rate for the country that your customer is in once a quarter. In the UK, we can register for the EUVATMOSS scheme, which is the VAT Mini One-Stop Shop. You do not have to register for this in advance, but you must do it within 22 days of your first sale. And after that, even if you make no more, you seem to need to submit nil returns once a quarter. To a big business, this is no problem, but if you're a tiny business already working till 2 in the morning, remembering to send a nothing at all return once a quarter may be a problem. So I've had a little look at the possible costs of compliance. I've done this in pounds, and I do apologise for those of you who are in euros. I'll be happy to work out with you your local rates if you feel this is something you want to take further. First of all, using third-party providers such as Amazon. As I've said, you can not register at all for EUVATMOSS if all of your digital sales go through a marketplace that is accounting for VAT on your behalf. Not all of them are, and we really need to be careful, because you could have 2 that do and 1 that doesn't, and you need to ask each of your providers what's going on. The marketplace costs can cost you anything between 30 and 40%, in that they are selling at retail and you are selling at wholesale. The advantage of this, though, is for many tiny businesses that there is a marketing element. If you are on Amazon, they are supposed to be marketing your product, and they're not just delivering it, and depending on your business model, it could be worth the money. If you are using your own website, PayPal cannot provide the data that is needed to comply with the location data. We've been given an easement in the UK, which means for 6 months, HMRC will accept the PayPal customer code, country code, as sufficient evidence of data. But you and I both know that if I have a PayPal account in the UK, which I do, it will show me as being in England, wherever in the world I make a purchase from. So if we go back to my Tenerife option, the fact I was in Tenerife would not show up. Now, for some of us, it's like, oh, well, if they find a way of sorting me out, I'll sort it out. For others, that's a really big deal. Most of us are having to look at how our product is delivered through shopping carts. Now, PayPal is a payment provider. It's a merchant account. So are Authorised, so are Stripe, so are Streamline. They're not marketplaces, because all they are doing is taking the money from your customer to give it to you. Nor are they shopping carts, in that they are not delivering the product. Many of us use shopping carts, such as One Shopping Cart and WooCommerce and various other things, to deliver the electronic product once payment is made. Many shopping carts that are US-based have no intention in the short term of complying with this legislation. Our current and soon-to-be ex-shopping cart provider has announced this publicly. Many shopping carts are already compliant, including WooCommerce, and I'm not on commission from them, but for those of you who are in a WordPress environment, WooCommerce is an easy add-on, and you already have most of the skills you need. Other shopping carts are renouncing their compliance strategy as we speak. But ultimately, you need to get to a shopping cart that will give you the data you need. And if you are regularly making sales in Europe, you need to register for VATMOSS, even if you're below your local country threshold. Now, a lot of people outside the EU are taking a kind of attitude of, well, let them make me, particularly in America, land of the free and home of the brave. But you should be aware that there is an existing tax treaty between the US government and the UK government, which provides for enforcement. And at some point or another, this will become a reality for you wherever you are in the world. So if you look at the costs of these things, a shopping cart, well, my one shopping cart costs £500 a year. It's going to be history due to non-compliance shortly. I'm going to go over to WooCommerce. That's going to cost me £200 or £300 in setup costs. And the cost of registering for VATMOSS in admin time, well, I'm hearing tales it's quite difficult, but I've also got to do quarterly VAT returns on the VATMOSS system. Now, the VATMOSS system is set to a quarterly calendar year. As it happens, my own UK VAT returns are not. So I have the wonderful choice of 8 quarters in a year, which I really do need for what for me is the marginal amount of European sales outside the UK. So I and many service providers are looking at the comparative cost of sending it manually or putting the manual back in. Back to the Stone Age some way. So one of the things I'm looking at is outsourcing it, because obviously as the director of my own company, I'm also a fee earner, and it doesn't make sense for me to be hand sending you emails for downloads, particularly at 2 in the morning when I might care to be asleep. Let's look at the cost of doing it yourself versus outsourcing against the marketplace costs. I've taken some price points that I think are of general use, but the principle applies the same. I've looked at the hourly rate for labour that you want to apply, whether the job takes 5 minutes or 10 minutes as typical places to look at how long would it take to send your email, your download price, and what you'd make after PayPal, if that's what you're currently using, on their current standard commission. I think it's about 3.2% plus the price per download. So if you want to make £6.50 an hour, which is not exactly getting rich running your own business, this is how it works out. In 5 minutes costs you 54 pence, and 10 minutes costs you £1.08. So you can see quite clearly that if you are selling a £2 download, and many people who sell patterns, MP3s, photographs are in that price range, after you've deducted for PayPal, you made £1.73 anyway. And if it took you 5 minutes to send that email, you've just lost another 54 pence. So that 5 minutes is actually a very high percentage of your download price and a slightly higher percentage of your price after PayPal. So for you, a marketplace that's marking up 30 or 40% actually may be the way to go, particularly when you factor in that at some point you're going to do VATMOSS returns, and that's going to take you a lot more than 5 minutes, but we don't know how much time per transaction it will take. And by the way, I've picked £6.50 as our lowest hourly rate because we have new legislation coming in the UK about working family tax credit, and if you as a self-employed person make less than £6.50 an hour, you will find the benefits agency telling you your business is not viable and inviting you to go onto Job Seekers and attempt to get a job. So anything that means you make less than that is not a practical option if you are based in the UK. The next price I've looked at is £9.50 an hour, 9.15. And I've picked this number, again not at random, because this is the figure calculated by the relevant body that is the minimum hourly rate that is accepted as the London living wage. So this is regarded as a subsistence wage. Now you can see that the 5-minute rate on that plus the PayPal rate gets you a very low return. And in fact, you need to be selling products at about £5 really to start looking at a viable return on London living wage. And again, whether you go to a marketplace or whether you start getting that stuff outsourced or doing it yourself is all about numbers. But you can see, although it may seem a very bad deal to pay a marketplace 15%, for example, PayHip, to handle all of it for you for low ticket items, it may be the only viable way to go. I'm having a look now at the £25 rate. And the reason I've picked this rate, and for those of you in cheaper areas, please don't have a heart attack, this is the standard cost of an external virtual assistant in London and the South East. So if you pay a VA to do this, it will cost you £2 odd for 5 minutes and £4.17 for 10 minutes. So you really need to be looking at product prices that are more than £5, and certainly on your £7.50 price point, it might or might not be viable. Of course, if you're smart and outsource your VA abroad, and we'll talk about that later, you could get someone to handle this for you at closer to the London living wage, which would change things enormously if you were getting £9.15 as a rate against a £7.50 product. Now, the professionals obviously in the room are not terribly interested in earning £25 an hour, and this table could go on forever, but I've picked a mid-range which is about £40, which is a rate for a very successful bookkeeper, mid-range professional in many parts of the country. Now, 5 minutes of your time costs £3.33 and 10 minutes costs £6.67. So you really need to be looking, if you must do this yourself, and I certainly wouldn't if that's your sort of fee earning rate, at only products in excess of £10. Now, our own fee rates as people in the legal world are much higher than that, and our product price points are higher than that. But at this point, it really does make sense to look at automation and upgrading your cart versus putting the people back in via webinars and things like this that frankly we do anyway to educate and inform our client base. If the numbers have given you a headache, please don't worry. You can go through them again on the replay of this video. The reason why I'm sharing them with you is a lot of people are reacting very emotionally to the VAT rules. And I understand that, going, I'm going to shut up shop, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. And I understand people feeling upset that at very little notice we've been told to gather VAT really to distribute to other countries. But at the end of the day, business is about making money, and one of the things we have to do as business people is to make the decision that profits us most. And I am not seeing anybody quantify accurately what it costs and what the options are, and I hope this points you in the right direction. This comes from a spreadsheet which I created. If anyone's brilliant at spreadsheets, help me make it user-friendly and I'd be happy to share it. But at the moment, it only makes sense to my mind and Christopher's, and that's not terribly helpful for anyone else. So for those of you who've joined us later on the call, the reason why people are looking at how do I handle EUVATMOSS is that if you want to sell into Europe, you're going to have to account for VAT where the end customer, if they are a consumer, is. One route is doing it yourself, one route is outsourcing, another route is marketplaces. But putting the manual back in can also mean putting in more live interaction into your process. The VA route, we've briefly looked at on costings, has implications. The cheapest VAs you are going to find are outside Europe. But please bear in mind that the EU requires you to keep your compliance data on a server inside Europe. And that means that you're going to have to liaise with your VA via a system where you know where the servers are, and you're going to have to get them to log into that system. Now, again, I'm not brand specific. We use Microsoft for this because we know our servers are in Dublin and we do not move our data around the world. By the way, our VA is in the UK, but we did foresee this problem and we realised that we needed to control where our data is. If you are thinking about getting a VA, we have a great dining seminar next week, which is also free, about making sure that you protect your business from data loss, you make sure your customer reputation is preserved, and you get what you pay for. Be aware of the fact that simply hiring someone to do this could go sadly wrong unless you set up proper arrangements, and I'll be happy to go through them with you next week. You're probably going to need, if you're taking the next option, to sort out your web design and shopping cart. We ran some webinars last year about contracting and managing your website designer, and I have to say there is no area of human endeavour where I have seen more disappointed people, apart from possibly matrimony, than paying a website designer. It's fairly obvious that just telling a web designer sort me out with EUVATMOSS could go sadly wrong. We are also running a free dial-in about how to brief and contract your web designer. If that's the route you're taking, please join us for that, because you can't go down all these. And finally, you might be looking at a bookkeeper. Many small businesses in the UK either keep no adequate financial records and have a bit of a scramble at the year end, or keep the records themselves. Now, in the early stages of my business, more than 30 years ago, the biggest mistake I made was intending to keep the books myself. Firstly, I never got round to it. Secondly, they were nearly always wrong. And thirdly, I can earn far more money than a bookkeeper by doing what I do. So if you add the EUVATMOSS complication on, far more businesses are going to be looking at bookkeepers. Before you go mad and think all bookkeepers are equal, I've got some horror stories I could tell you of bookkeepers who had no idea how to keep books. I commend to you joining our seminar on that, but be aware that keeping your data on modern bookkeeping systems can be really easy. I claim my expenses on my phone. Getting a bookkeeper that's hooked up with all of that can be very cheap and much easier than it used to be. But one way or another, you're going to have to comply with something. So I'm going to open the floor to questions and answering the questions as best I can. But I just want to say I am not a VAT specialist. Christopher is a barrister who was qualified years ago, decades ago. I am an HR specialist. We are speaking to you as business owners who are used to dealing with EU directives, because that's what we do for a living, not as VAT specialists. And our whole thing in Coffee Clatch is about getting you to make realistic arrangements with people you pay that end well and are appropriate and legal. And for those of you who are seeing this webinar, this QR code will take you to a link to the events that we have been talking about, and they're all free. Our idea is we want the maximum number of people trading, because otherwise, who are we going to do business with? Please don't shut up your shop because you can't handle this. So, Christopher, what have we got on questions?
A few, I hope that I've... can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can indeed.
Great. A few questions. I hope I've managed to answer some of them and not too inaccurately. I did put in the "don't sue us, we're not VAT specialists" thing into the chat, so I did preempt that one. Joe's question was, if she puts links in her newsletter and people go and get stuff on a download, would it escape that rather than people getting stuff off the website?
It's very, very grey. And I mean, I've done the best I can to clarify it, but the best thing I would suggest she does, and I know it's going to sound painful, is email that question, get a written answer from HMRC. HMRC have got a set of guidelines about what constitutes a manual download, and I can put up a link to those. But at the end of the day, the danger with each of us making our own interpretation is that HMRC may say to you, well, you interpreted it wrong. So what the Digital Campaign Group are urging people to do is to formulate what you think will work using the guidelines, but check it with them and say, if this is what I'm doing, am I obliged to deal with VAT on a European basis or not? And I'm not trying to be unhelpful, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day what I think about that. It matters what the VAT people think about it. And I am putting, I hope, into the Hangout a link to the most up-to-date guidance from HMRC, which defines digital, and that's going into the chat room. And that came out on the 29th of December, and I would say to people, there were earlier guidance notes in November which have been superseded, and a lot of people who have just woken up to this idea have not understood, and I don't blame them, that the November guidance is out of date. And if this is doing your head in, I don't blame you. So there we are. And I hope that helps, but I've set you the link in the chat room about the definitions of what is and what isn't. And if you go to that link, there is a lovely little table about a third of the way down, and PDF documents manually emailed by sellers are not covered by the new rules. PDF documents automatically emailed by the seller systems are. So my guess is that if you send out an email through MailChimp or something like that, that's an automated email, and then it's downloaded, that would be covered. But we are all collaborating on this.
So I'm just picking up the events page on Coffee Clutch because apparently the QR code isn't accessible on the Hangout, and I'm just about to put that into the...
Hang on a minute, I've got it. I'm putting it as a pop-in onto the chat.
Oh, well done.
Won't you? It's a bit weird in your chat stream. If you click the I'm interested button, that will give you the next 3 events if you want to sign up. I'll leave it there for a while. It's not compulsory. As I said, we're just trying to pull together resources that allow you to cope when you've got to move very rapidly.
Right, Savan asked for the link to the guidelines, but I think you've put that up now. I can see that in the chat.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's Aline saying the passcode. A couple of interesting questions from Eamon. The first one, early on in the seminar, about the Americans don't seem to be bothering with all this, and my answer to him was they may get caught by the EU and double taxation treaties in the end, but it doesn't affect what we have to do here. Is that a fair comment?
Actually, there is already a treaty for enforcement, and I don't know how the Americans are going to enforce it inside America.
Yeah.
A lot of Americans are going, well, don't be ridiculous, I'm not doing it, but their government's already signed the relevant treaty. So to that extent, something will happen, but what, I couldn't begin to say, you know.
We've had a couple of questions about what's the minimum threshold for the sort of human element to make this into a service and not just a digital download. Is the stuff in the guidelines about this, or have you got any further input you can make on that, Annabelle?
Okay, I need to explain this without driving us all mad. There is no guidance at EU level about human element at all. The human element guidance that I'm referring to is HMRC. So if you are in ERA or elsewhere, this definition may have no meaning for you. If you are following HMRC's guidelines, and I've put up the link in the chat room, first of all, it doesn't talk about how much. So it's not like if it takes you 5 minutes, you're covered, and if it took you 10, you're not. It just talks about the fact of. Now, I think if you really took the Michael and spent a nanosecond in a webinar and went, I'm in the webinar about, you might find them looking at you for tax evasion. But obviously, if you're emailing something by hand, that's significant. If you are doing a live webinar like this is significant. And some of the live webinars have been 20 minutes. You know, they don't have to be 4 hours, do they? So many people on membership sites, and certainly it's one of the things I'm looking at, are going to do a monthly webinar. I mean, if you think about it, we do, for Coffee Clutch, a weekly freebie anyway. So it's not a big problem in some service businesses. But there isn't an actual 10-minute is good, 5 minutes is bad rule, if that's what you're thinking.
Yeah,
what did you have in mind?
Joe's just pitched up on the chat. What about if we have a product with a live chat each week or month? This is very much what you're talking about. Yeah. So that putting the human element in. And I mean, I think for coaches and people like that, the idea of having a program that's spread over a period that's got some downloaded elements and some human elements where you've got maybe some group webinars and then possibly even some things I've seen one-on-one calls as well. Then you're probably getting you're probably getting away from this at that point, aren't you?
Nobody knows. One-on-one calls will be a service anyway.
Yeah.
And so legal advice, for example, is just clearly identified as a service. So if we were to advise a client and then send them an email, albeit with a standard downloading, that would not be a digital product.
Quite.
So, but I think mailing out with standard links to something people download themselves is, if it's a mailing system where you're doing a mass mail. If you're sending an individual mail, obviously not. If you ask me, therefore, if I put 3 people in my one Outlook mail, are we covered or not? I would say, who would know?
Quite. Yeah, because Aline says, my current status is a weekly live call for my members as well as downloadable MP3s and PDFs.
Yeah.
So she says, so I think at the moment I'm okay. I can sense the optimism in there.
My current definitions, I think, yes, but I would like you to look at your terms of trade, because I think that if you're going that route, you need to look at what you're offering. Because, and Christopher, this is more your area than mine, and I know we haven't had a chance to talk about it because we've been too busy tearing down our own shopping carts. But look at the terms of trade issue, Ali. If you charge for downloads and offer free support, you are offering a mixed supply. And there's rules in the VAT stuff that I've linked you to about mixed supply. Whereas if you charge for the support and offer free downloads, the situation is different. Now, one of the debates there is, if the download's free and someone rips off your copyright, how do you sue for damages?
Oh, good point, because you've put no value on it, so therefore there's no damage. You've lost nothing.
Indeed, there we are. So what I've been working on, and I haven't got it there, Alan, is we do live webinars anyway. We do want to charge for our downloads. They are B2B anyway for us, so there's a little okay. Most of the people we deal with are in business. But for those small number of consumers, we need to arrive at terms of trade that account for this, which is one of the reasons I get my co-director, who's a whiz at that sort of thing, into these webinars, because I've identified this as a key issue for people who are going to bundle back in the manual. Because although having free downloads will get you out of VATMOSS, because even if you had to charge Hungarian VAT at 27%, it would be off nothing, wouldn't it? If someone steals your product, how do you sue for damages? And I think we need to come up with terms of trade that give a value of 0 at the point of supply and a value of 100 quid at the point of copying or something. But I think it can be done, Crystal.
Yes, I think it could.
And this is the sort of thing. poor people on our call that we spend our life conjuring with, and this is the way we think. So I'm not trying
These
to,
are our internal coffee clutches rather than our
you
external.
don't want to get in on that, but I think we could do that. So Aline, I think you're fine, but I think you might want to email a copy of your current terms of trade to Christopher for him to have a quick free look at, and that is quick, by the way, because it would be interesting to see what they say, because yours probably say roughly what most people say. So, you know,
And if you don't have standard terms of business, can I put in an old Fogies recommendation to you that you do have them, because they really help. There's a whole lot of discussion that you just don't have to get into with your clients if you've just got your terms of trade on your site and it deals with stuff like your copyright and so on. Just makes
but also, I think if you get into a row with the revenue about what you're doing, having terms of trade that make clear what's the service and what's the download and when downloads are paid or not, and showing that you're following that for that is going to be a lot easier than having nothing at all and then going, well, on Mondays I treat it as that and Tuesdays I treat it as that. So I don't want to bore people with legals, but Ali, get hold of us and I'm sure I can twist Christopher's arm to have a quick look at your existing terms of trade. And we are great believers in one page in English, large type. Right, I don't like doing business with people who give me 400 pages of things I can't read.
I think it's fair to say Annabelle's a great believer in that, and when my legal genes kick in, then then she has to weed out the here and afters and here and befores, but she does it very well and says, "Should we do this in English now?"
Yeah. Now, I've got a question for someone about talking about the accountants and bookkeepers we use, actually. I'm not on commission for these people. Maybe I should be. I personally am a great fan of Xero, which is Xero.
Xero.
Yeah. Xero, yeah, I was trouble with this.com. That is because I'm an idiot about accounting. I'm actually numerically dyslexic, so I'm really accountingly challenged. And the thing I like about that is I claim my expenses on my phone. It sorts it out. If you sell time, I mean, we also use, what's it called? FreshBooks to do the time and integrate with that. But obviously, if you're a one-person band, if you mostly sell products, Xero hooks in with all the main shopping carts, so it feeds into our accounting what we sold, really nice, picks up our bank accounts, our credit cards. If you sell time, FreshBooks is brilliant. The two integrate, but if you've got a business that size, you really do need to have someone on books. And yes, oddly enough, bookkeepers are one of the most troublesome, expensive and least useful areas of business. Sorry if I'm offending any that are on the course, but actually they can spend hours doing things you're not obliged to do. I mean, I always start with saying, where's the law that says I have to do this? Because they're always going, the law says, but being the difficult animal I am, I go, could I have a copy of it? And it turns out half the time there's no such law, the bookkeeper just prefers it. So yeah, come on my bookkeeping seminar. That's for stroppy people who run their own business and don't pay people to waste their time and money. I don't think I'm ever the only one on it, by the way. So no, I'm not on any affiliate deals, etc., etc. So as far as that goes, because I want to be neutral in the room when I'm doing that.
Really interesting late entry from Joe saying, "What about affiliate deals? Who's selling that? If you get a share of the revenue?" And I suppose the question is, where is it and what is it?
I think if you think about it, and again, I mean, we've been defeated by Google advertising because the EU doesn't really know that we work like this, and this is one of the problems. But if I were on an affiliate deal, I would get a percentage of sales, and that is a commission. And the sales commission is because I've done something, albeit electronically. So my guess is that commission is service-based revenue. It's not a digital product. That's very different to the sale of the product.
Yes, which will be the problem of the person who you are affiliated with, not yours, not your problem as the affiliate.
The only place it's going to cause complications is that the affiliate deal may have to have a little bit in the terms of trade, because you wouldn't be expecting to get your affiliate percentage on the tax, would you? So, and I mean, one of the problems with this is, and again, EU tax varies. The lowest rate of VAT in the EU is for digital products is 3%, and the highest rate is 27%. So, you know, that will really affect your affiliate. But going back to some of the issues, what's quite interesting is when you sell B2C, you know that you have to put up prices that include VAT. For example, if you go into your local restaurant today, you do not expect to see a price that says lunch costs 10 quid plus VAT, do you? So what the EU's done by requiring us, when we trade B2C, to display the prices that are inclusive of that, is two things. One is a lot of shopping carts, our current one cannot handle this. It displays all prices plus VAT, and yet under VATMOSS we have to display the customer price including VAT. But equally, you have to absorb the variance. So if you are in the UK and you're already VAT registered, you're used to 20% VAT. The median rate of VAT on digital goods in Europe is 21%. So depending on what market you're in, it's not a big deal. But if you are charging including VAT and absorbing what might be 3% VAT or 27%, that can be quite a fright on a low margin item. In fact, if you look at some of the figures, you're only making 20% in the first place. So the net result of all of that is people putting the prices up. And I would say, do not put your deliveries, your courses on hold, ladies, right? A, it takes ages to write a course. B, people are working around the clock as we speak to provide electronic solutions to all of this. If your courses include human element, you'll be fine with things as they stand. And there are WooCommerce plugins that handle this for you, and even Taxamo. And I know they've been doing a lot of scaremongering about all of this. But what they will do for you is, if you're a PayPal user, because they don't yet integrate with every shopping cart, but they're working on it, they will do you up to 20 transactions in the EU completely free of charge. And they will handle all the data storage for you, all the admin. What they don't do is pay the VAT for you, but they give you the reports you need. Because one of the problems with PayPal is that there are 28 countries in the EU, but there are something like 72 VAT rates. Some of them changed between November and today, 2 of them, and PayPal's current idea is that you will manually update all those VAT rates in your cart. The person who makes an app that automatically sucks in all the current VAT rates to somewhere is going to make a fortune. And my guess is that someone is working very hard on that as we write. So don't give up writing your products. Don't give up getting ready to go digital. Just be aware that part of your getting ready for launch is to identify platforms and methods that are appropriate for what you're trying to do. I'm seeing so much despair out there, and you know, I just think this is rubbish. We went into business to trade with anyone who wanted to trade with us, didn't you? I went into business to trade with anyone in the world who wanted to trade with me. I'm not blocking off Europe. And some people are responding by saying, well, I won't trade with the EU, I'll switch it off. If you're outside the EU, that's your own business. If you're inside the EU, people are saying, is that discrimination on the grounds of nationality, which is illegal? Well, if you're saying I won't sell to the Germans, that is. But if you are saying I've done a cost-benefit analysis and I do £50 a year's worth of European sales, and the admin costs, and that's why I gave you my table of handling all of this, are going to be £200, that is not discrimination on the grounds of nationality. That is for a significant organisational and business reason. But I, for one, will not be turning off the EU. I will handle it. I, for one, will not be turning off the other countries that are bringing this in. And you might like to know that Canada is introducing this. They hope to do it in March. South Africa's already announced they're doing it with a £3,600 threshold. America doesn't seem to know that they've got a draft bill doing this inside of America, and taxing digital sales at the point of consumption is the new tax platform for the 21st century. So if you are saying I'm not going to trade outside of my own borders because of VAT, you are saying you're not trading globally. And that may be appropriate to your business, but it may not. And yes, I am collecting people who comply, people who help, etc. Because in the end, for me, I'm going to stay in business.
It seems to me that, I mean, if there are people who are going to be frightened off staying in business because of this, those of us who are going to stay in, well, the competition just got a little bit thinner. Sounds good to me. Just something. It's another piece of terrain management, isn't it? We're used to dealing with VAT anyway, so it just makes it a bit more of a pain.
The businesses I've been speaking to, almost without cease since November when this first came to my attention, are what we call kitchen table businesses.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I mean no offence to you, Chris, because you're a genius of law, but if I said to you, we do have a PayPal thingy, we never use it because we've got a merchant account, would you like to go in now, program in all the correct VAT rates and work out how it's going to relate to our shopping cart?
Absolutely.
How long do you think that might take you?
I'd just say you've got to be kidding. I think I was just selling Croydon.
Absolutely. So you can understand people's response to this is I give up, really.
Yeah. Go for the WooCommerce route, yeah.
Well, if you're big enough, but you see, again, and I'm not trying to be negative, right? If I said to you, okay, strip down our shopping carts, put them in a new platform and choose the plugins you need and test them and make them valid, how long would that take you?
I mean, I think I'd find a large bucket of ice cold water and go and stick my head in it first.
That is exactly what the poor people who sell from their back bedroom as sole traders are experiencing.
Yeah.
Right? And what is really irritating, and I've been to loads of accountants and said, why didn't you tell people about that? So it's really simple, just collect the data and put in a European VAT return. And I'm going, what is simple about this? Now, for a lot of people, the simple answer is the marketplace.
Yeah.
It's galling that you're forced out of the retail market, and I think that the terrible thing about this is a lot of marketplaces stand between you and the customer, so you don't know who your customers are, really. And I have been speaking to people, wherever you can, if you have an option on the delivery mechanism, make sure there's a sign up to your newsletter so that you always have some relationship with your end customer, because ultimately that is what's king in the modern digital world. It's having those relationships, isn't it?
Yes.
And the unfortunate side effect of marketplace is not being able to speak to people.
Annabelle, we're coming. We just sort of tipped over noon now, but a couple of final questions I'd like to pick up off the last few bits of the chat. You mentioned a website about you're linking up with PayPal and being able to the 20 transactions.
I put it in the stream, I think. I'll do it again.
Is that Taxamo?
Yep. We'll do 23 EU transactions.
Okay, Alison, that's a couple down in the chat for you.
Coming in again.
Aline asks, what's the best question to ask a prospective shopping cart about all this?
Oh. First of all, I would Google that shopping cart's name with the words EU VAT and VATMOSS. Because I've been doing that, and that's how I came to my decisions, because what that tells me, it gets me into the members' forums, the complaints, everything. Asking them is like asking a salesman, is your product the best product for me? Yes. Oh, yes, darling, of course it is. Where's your checkbook? So I'm actually been Googling EUVATMOSS, EU VAT, and the name of the shopping cart. So what you then get is there are people, and you have to understand that a marketplace and a shopping cart are not the same thing. A marketplace goes out and sells your product for you. A shopping cart just handles you know, how you get
People who
paid.
come to you, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so they will always be different. So how I got to WooCommerce for us was I Googled VAT compliance and saw hundreds of messages from different WooCommerce, because it's a really big platform designer, going, we've got a plugin that can help, or we will have one by tomorrow, or don't panic. I went to our current shopping cart and Googled EUVATMOSS compliance and saw hundreds of customers going, what are you doing about it? And their helpline going, what is it?
Yeah.
And then about 2 weeks later, I got, no, we're not going to do that. This didn't fill me with confidence. So that's my method I've been applying. We are collecting on the Facebook group a list of compliant and non-compliant carts. So if you join us on the EUVAT, I think it's coordination team, but we're also putting them up in digital VAT. Or if you want, I can send a link round at the end of the seminar, take you about half an hour, to the current list, but that current list was updated on the 7th of January. We can't keep them permanently live. I'd be happy to do it, but I would Google constantly. But be aware of the fact Taxamo are offering a great service, but their whole business model is charging you to handle EU VAT. So they are very down on the exemptions and very up on compliance, and you can understand that, can't you?
Yeah. Final question, because I think it's be helpful. Joe's saying, clarify what you said at the beginning. If you supply the download on a webinar, that's okay. Now,
Yes.
and to clarify my own thinking on this, that if that's a live webinar, yes, but if it's if it's a webinar you've recorded that people are downloading, then you're back into the digital product. It's only the people in the room as you're live. Have I got that?
And it's further complicated. And I mean, welcome to the digital world, Christopher. Christopher normally prefers quill pens. If you think about it, this webinar is live, and although it's not a sales webinar, we could be doing live in the room deals, couldn't we? You know, people do, buy this now, blah, blah, blah. By the way, I'm going to put up my final live in the room freebie. The conversation popping has been up there on the chat for those of you who want to join our conversations. I'm just going to change that over. If you are paying people who are not your employees, or you are thinking about paying people who are not your employees, we've got a great series of freelance top tips that would avoid the maniacal bookkeeper problem. It is free. Again, we know some of you have got to instruct your web designer. We know some of you will take on VAs, whatever. We're trying to give you what you need so that you get value for the money you pay. So, Christopher, while we're doing that, that's the kind of in the room offer, but it's a freebie. Now, let me give you an example. This is live. If we were charging for that, if we charge for the seminar, the webinar, this would be included in it. It wouldn't be a digital product for EUVATMOSS purposes.
Right.
If I then finish this recording, it is possible, but we're not going to do it, to sell the recording. That would be a digital product. If I manage to find a way to sell from the recording, because these things don't appear in the recording, that would also be a digital product. So one of the things the EU haven't really taken on board is that people like me move in and out of live in microseconds. I could now start playing a video.
Quite.
That I pre-recorded. So what we've got is 2003 thinking in a 2014 world.
That's quite modern, really, for lawyers and bureaucrats. Only 10 years behind?
Yeah, so what we are campaigning for in the EU campaign group, do come and join us, blah, 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 is to get a threshold that basically takes out the tiniest businesses. Lots of people are campaigning on other things. For example, the government's just launching free digital economy support, and there's not one word about how the hell do you handle EUVATMOSS in it. They say that the reason we're not making enough money is we all need more training, but there's no training on this. So we're trying to get them to put it all together, because there's a knowledge hole at Europe and bureaucratic level. They didn't even know people ran global businesses from their back bedroom. There's a skills gap amongst small businesses you can't do this stuff, I can't do it, and not everyone makes enough money to pay someone else to do it. And this short-term answer, to my mind, is to get an exemption for small businesses, and it's a big ask because you know how stubborn Europe are, and a lot of other EU countries don't have them.
Well, except that there are, historically, the Italians.
They haven't passed the legislation at all, so
That's even better.
they haven't managed to do it, so no one knows. So I want to kind of end this with a wrap up to say this is going to be available for replay. We covered a lot of information very fast. We've got supplementals driving down various places coming up. Please stay in business. Please don't panic about EUVATMOSS. Please make the right financial decision for you, which could be outsourcing, it could be putting your prices up, it could be going to a marketplace, or it could be getting a free WooCommerce theme and maybe 10 quid's worth of plugins, or 20 quid's or 40 quid's, or it could be putting the service back in with the webinars. Whatever it is, stay in business, be profitable, do not give up. That's what I want to say to you, and I really, really want to be talking to you in 3 years' time or 5 years' time about the people that you pay because you're so busy and so profitable that you need to pay me. So I hope that is where you're going to be, and keep in contact with us. If it's okay with you guys, I'll send round a brief little email with some of these links in, because the chat disappears when the video goes from live to broadcast. Please join us on another call. I hope you found this useful.